This transmission is going to cover the life of Stormtrooper Davin Felth. The bulk of his story is Legends, so we're going to start there. But stick around to the end, because we're going to cover how Felth made his way into canon. When Davin Felth joined the Imperial Academy, he didn't set out to be a soldier that would crush individual freedom. He was idealistic, you could even argue disillusioned. His journey is that of Legends, but the story is a good one just the same. He was born in 18 BBY, pretty close to the birth of Luke and Leia Skywalker. Felth had a strong desire to serve the galaxy as he grew up. When he turned 18, he enlisted in the Imperial military to serve the galaxy. He was sent to an academy on Carida, which was known for its intense training regimen. Felth was a very enthusiastic recruit. He did his best in all aspects of his training. He earned a spot in the all-terrain armored transport training program. This was a coveted and prestigious position. During his training, he saw an issue with the walking tank's design. He surmised that the legs could be entangled, compromising the moving fortresses. He brought this up to his commanding officer, then Colonel Maximilian Veers. Felth thought finding this flaw would elevate his status at the Academy even further. Veers dismissed this information. He only saw the might of the AT-ATs, not the flaws. This would obviously come back to bite Veers during the Battle of Hoth, but that's another story for another time. Veers didn't like Felth's attempt to disrupt the Walker program and was worried that Felth would get other officers involved in this theory. He wanted to shut Felth up, so he moved him to Zeta Squadron, an infantry division that was sent to the Outer Rim. The division he was reassigned to was sent to Tatooine, chasing after an escape pod believed to be carrying stolen plans for the Death Star, the Empire's ultimate form of galactic domination and intimidation. At this time, Felth was serving under Captain Mod Tarek. Tarek was looking after his own career, probably trying to get away from this Outer Rim desert post. When Felth tried to get more information on their assignment, Tarek snapped at him, saying that he should be performing his duties as told without asking any questions. That kind of harkens back to
good soldiers follow orders
that we saw in the Clone Wars and the Bad Batch, but obviously this legend story was written decades before. The unit searched the hot sands of Tatooine for hours before anything was found. Felth is the one who saw sun glinting off the wreckage of the escape pod. He identified the tracks of droids leading away from the pod and even found a piece of a droid. This little tidbit is kind of interesting. In some sources it was a piece of R2-D2, in other sources it was a piece of C-3PO. His unit followed the tracks and eventually came upon a Jawa sandcrawler. The stormtroopers searched the entire roaming city for the missing droids, but of course did not find them. Tarek questioned the Jawas and got the name and location of the specific droids in question out of the small creature. He then ordered his men to destroy the sandcrawler and kill all the Jawas. He may have been justifying this to himself that it was needed to cover the tracks of the Empire as they were chasing very sensitive intel. To me, he was just sadistic and frustrated with his mission. He took his frustrations out on these small defenseless scavengers. He made his men stage the crime scene as a Tusken Raider attack. Felth did not participate. He turned his back to the carnage and kept to himself, trying not to be noticed. Zeta Squadron then made their way across the dunes to the modest Lars moisture farm. Once again, they turned the entire place upside down. Felth made himself look busy off to the side, not really wanting to participate in any more violence and violation of the citizens' rights. Tarek took the lead on interrogating Owen Lars. There are no details on how this exactly went down, but given the resilience that Owen showed staring down Inquisitors, and the fact that Tarek was not above wholesale slaughter, I'd imagine it was a pretty rough questioning for Owen. Owen, defiant as long as he could be, actually spit in the trooper's face. He was a tough man. He led a difficult life, moisture farming in an Outer Rim desert. But he had his limits. Tarek got it out of him that his nephew, Luke, was off the farm with the droids. Owen, and therefore Tarek, had no clue that the smaller of the droids, the astromech R2-D2, had actually fled. They had no idea of Obi-Wan or Ben Kenobi's involvements. And Owen had no idea about the Death Star plans. Tarek did know of the plans and thought these farmers were in on it. The fact that the Jawas and then the farmers seemed to be one step ahead of him must have enraged him even further. He's already shown some signs that he's unstable. He surmised the nephew must be taking the droids to Mos Eisley, the closest city and spaceport of any note on the desert planet. On the way out of the farm, Tarek decided to show the citizens of Tatooine what would happen to those who helped the rebellion. He had the place destroyed and the Larses burned. Felth, once again, avoided participating. He realized his naive belief in the Empire as a strong support system for the galaxy cruelty was a complete and utter lie. To go on a quick tangent here, it seems strange for Tarek to bother making a cover-up for killing the Jawas. Obviously, at that time, he didn't want anyone around to know that the Empire did it. But then, he killed 2 farmers and destroyed their homestead as a message to those around them. He obviously had something wrong with him, so maybe I'm looking for logic and consistency where there just aren't any. Zeta Squadron continued on to Mos Eisley. Felth and his companions started to interrogate everyone around. He chose to deliver his reports to Lieutenant Alima to avoid having to deal with the insane Tarek. The first day they were there, they just stopped citizens in the street at random and asked them some questions. The next day was much more organized. Troopers broke off to do door-to-door sweeps as well as setting up checkpoints all around the city. Anyone going in or out was stopped and questioned. Felth heard what he thought was a domestic disturbance and went to investigate. The commotion was actually a pair talking excitedly about a fight that had happened at Chalmun's Cantina nearby. Felth rushed over and searched the cantina. He saw a lot of things that would have raised the eyebrows of any law enforcement, but his specific mission was finding droids and a supposed rebel smuggling them. He saw no droids. Little did he know that he actually saw the exact people he was looking for. Zeta Squadron regrouped and received intel from a spy about some questionable activity at the now infamous Docking Bay 94. The Stormtroopers were soon involved in a shootout with a single man standing by a modified YT-1300 light freighter. Felth, seeing the Empire for what it was, actually admired this man's attitude. One guy standing against something like 20, defying all odds. Despite being ridiculously outnumbered, this man was standing in defiance against the Empire and against evil itself. Felth saw the sadistic Tarek taking his time to zero in on the man with his E-11 blaster rifle. Before Tarek could get his shot off, Felth shot him in the back, killing his commanding officer. This act of defiance allowed the rebels time to escape as the rest of the troopers were stunned by Tarek's death. Lucky for Felth, no one knew who fired the shot. In the confusion of the firefight, they assumed it was one of the fleeing rebels. I guess Stormtroopers weren't taught anything about blaster bolt trajectory, as there was no way that the lone rebel standing outside the ship could have possibly shot Tarek in the back. Either way, Felth felt more secure about his place in the galaxy. He would stay with the Empire, but do what he could to feed information to the Rebel Alliance. Not only did he know about troop movements and standards, but he had a more unique knowledge about the AT-AT program. There was one more footnote about Felth's part on Tatooine that I found ridiculous and kind of hilarious, so I definitely want to mention it. At one point, a Rodian was in the middle of a bunch of male Rontos, who all thought that the Rodian's odor was that of a female Ronto's pheromones for mating season. This is an insanely bizarre story for someone to have thought of and brought into the expanded universe. Davin Felth was a name assigned to a stormtrooper in A New Hope who finds the metal ring that fell off of C-3PO's knee. Look, sir, droids. The name was assigned to the trooper far after the release in 1977. This happened in 1995. Author Doug Beeson wrote the short story When the Desert Wind Turns, The Stormtrooper's Tale, for the Legends book Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina. Kind of in the vein of the more recent From a Certain Point of View books, where they take these side characters and identify their story and really spell out what brought them to the cantina and their perspective on the things that went on. Felth wasn't brought into canon until 2019 in an article written for Fantasy Flight Games called Dominate the Desert. There's a bit of a discrepancy here. In the 2018 book, From a Certain Point of View, that series I just mentioned, calls the trooper with the orange pauldron, long said to be Felth, as a man named Wanton. For years, I had misremembered Felth's story. I thought he was the one who actually killed Owen and Beru Lars. I first read about him in 1995's Essential Guide to Characters. It wasn't until I revisited the Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina story that I got the story right and decided to make this transmission. As a quick programming note for the channel, my wife and I are now doing live streams every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Check them out right here. We're going to be talking Skeleton Crew and answering your questions. For more on side characters from the Star Wars galaxy, check out this transmission next.